without further ado, Ari Ne'eman.
Well, thank you, Jim, for that great introduction. I was actually told by a mutual friend that Jim was a little bit nervous here tonight because he's very used to making fun of paralyzed veterans, but it's sort of a new experience for him to have to perform before this audience. So I think he did a pretty good job, don't you? Thank you to all of you here tonight who've come out to help us celebrate 5 incredible years. When we first got started, I would not have predicted that we'd be sitting here tonight at the National Press Club 5 years later with senior members of the Obama administration, who we're going to hear from shortly, and so many friends, allies, and supporters from the cross-disability community. Events like these are, frankly, they're a time to give thanks, and to a lot of different people. In that spirit, it's my pleasure to start by thanking some of our sponsors. First, Freddie Mac, who not only made a financial investment in the autistic community, but also a practical one by choosing to partner with ASAN to launch a new internship program for recent autistic college graduates. Freddie Mac is not only putting its money where its mouth is, but putting its hiring practices there as well, which is absolutely crucial in opening the doors to greater diversity in the workforce. So, absolutely fantastic. I'd also like to thank and recognize our other sponsors reflected in our program. Their support helps ensure that ASAN will be able to continue our important work in the coming year. And in addition, let me acknowledge a sponsor who is not listed in the program, the Mitsubishi Electric America Foundation, which has just recently pledged to generally support our new Autism Campus Inclusion Initiative in 2012. Thank you, Mitsubishi. But events like tonight, frankly, they call on us to do more than just give thanks. They call on us to reflect a little bit, to ask some important questions. And, you know, most important question to scholars, philosophers, and folks lying awake at night is, why are we here? What are we doing here? What is this all about? And I don't just mean why are we here at the National Press Club tonight, but why is the self-advocacy movement important? Why is it important that people with disabilities talk for ourselves and that we fight against that which is about us without us? Why does self-advocacy matter? When Scott Robertson and I, and by the way, ASAN's co-founder Scott Robertson is here in the audience, When Scott and I co-founded ASAN 5 years ago, the national conversation on autism was frankly very different from what it was today. Most people's ideas of autism were shaped by Rain Man and various public service announcements promoting pity and fear, and television shows that contracted what I like to call very special episode syndrome. Some of you may be familiar with very special episode syndrome. It's a very, very concerning public health epidemic upon which a television show contracts a disabled character for an episode or two. Fortunately, they're usually able to kick the habit pretty quickly, sending us back to the institution or the school where we belong, and usually the non-disabled characters learn a very important lesson along the way. It's a great frustration of mine. But when folks talked about autistic people then, and still often today, but we're making progress, they often assumed that they're talking about children. And because of that, a lot of people told us when we were getting started that frankly the time wasn't ripe for an advocacy organization run by and for autistic people. They said, the public and the autism community, they're not ready. You should wait a while. You should give them more time. They'll include you when they're feeling a little bit more comfortable, when they get around to it, when they're sure. And, the task was very daunting. It seemed like nobody had done this before, although we later learned that was not the case. And the odds were against us. So, under other circumstances, we might have taken that advice. But we didn't, and I want to tell you why. Before we started ASAN, I remember reading an email from a young autistic woman who was writing to an online support group she belonged to after a singularly horrific day she had had. In the morning, she went to an autism fundraiser where the organizers spent their time talking about how people should give in order to help these poor, unfortunate souls, people like her who could never hold a job, they said, never live independently, never have any friends, never be included in their communities. In the afternoon, she decided, well, I've had enough of these folks. I'm going to look up new autism organizations. And she discovered that one of the leading autism groups in her country, in Canada, had recently testified to the Canadian Parliament saying that autism is worse than cancer because the person with autism has a normal lifespan. And finally, to try and unwind in the evening, she decided to watch some television, and where she promptly discovered in a commercial break a public service announcement comparing the odds of having an autistic child, a child like her, with the odds of being in a fatal car accident. And after describing the various elements of this rather unfortunate day, she wrote in her email, why do they hate us so much? What did we ever do to these people? And, I understand what she meant perfectly. In fact, I'm sure I've said the exact same thing many, many times growing up, and probably even still today. And I say that knowing perfectly well that it isn't about hate. I know that even those that we disagree with have the best of intentions. I know that even the most vile and fear-mongering advertisement or fundraising effort is in some perverse way motivated by love. But what became immediately evident at that point, and what drove us to found ASAN, was that good intentions and love were, quite frankly, just not enough. That even love, in the absence of empathy, can be harmful. And that when people that you talk about or set policy on or conduct research regarding are not in the room, even good people feel licensed to say horrible things. You cannot help people through pity and fear. And so we decided that an organization was needed, that a unified voice of autistic people speaking for ourselves was needed. And ASAN grew, supported by autistic people and our allies and the parent and professional community, people who saw our mission and values as their own. But we needed other partners. We needed to find other people who would support us. We are a new community. We needed to figure out, where are we going to get friends when the situation looks hostile politically and tactically for us? And more importantly, how are we going to define ourselves not just by what we didn't like about how others approached us, but also, frankly, by speaking to an autistic experience in this country and in this world in positive terms. And it's very interesting. We found the answer to both of those things in the same place, the broader disability rights movement. We were not the first group of people, we soon discovered, with disabilities who were not happy with the dominant narrative about us, either about disability in general or our particular disability. I remember the first time I spoke to the folks over at AAPD and ADAPT and so on. Yes, they're here tonight. And learned that they were dealing with the same issues that we were. And it took us a bit of time to realize it, but soon it was clear that I think everyone's always surprised when they learn this about themselves. We weren't as special as we thought we were. And frankly, we were thrilled to learn that, because it meant that there was this whole movement, other organizations, this broader community of people that we could draw on for strength. And we came to see our work through the eyes of past disability rights struggles. And we knew we weren't alone. Names like Ed Roberts, names like Justin Dart, and Judy Heumann, and Marka Bristow, and Jacobus Pembroke, and Judy Chamberlain, and countless others spoke of a history of leadership by and for disabled people that went further back than we had ever dreamed of. Disabled people who have brought power and hope to those of us who are too often written off by society, and in the process of doing so, perhaps more importantly, built a sense of kinship and community that went beyond any particular advocacy campaign or initiative. I'm not a wheelchair user, but when I see pictures of those who are crawling up the Capitol steps to fight for the passage of the ADA, I know that they were fighting for my rights as much as they were fighting for anyone else's. I'm not deaf, but when I read about the Deaf President Now protests at Gallaudet, I see something that speaks to me as a disabled person in a very personal way. There is a broader disabled experience in America, and we as autistic people are part of it. Now, the prejudices and ignorance that I spoke of earlier, it hasn't gone away, but we're fighting it and we're making progress. Not only that, more importantly, we're offering an alternative. We're finding ways to make real progress on the practical challenges that face us. For example, healthcare access. ASAN is partnering with several major research universities to utilize community-based participatory research methodologies. It's a great technique in which we're involved not just as test subjects, but as partners in the research going on about us to come up with new tools for physicians on improving healthcare access experiences. We're creating resources written by and for us, like our new Navigating College Handbook, which I should note is available for purchase right outside. But we're building, more importantly, we are building a sense of community, which is what any minority group, and we are, just like any other minority group. We have the same legitimacy, and we should have the same rights. Any minority group looks to a sense of community to make it through tough times. I want to close by sharing a quote from Ed Roberts, the father of the independent living movement, talking in a speech he gave upon the victory of the 504 sit-ins. And I bring it up not just because Ed Roberts was a fantastic orator, and not just because Ed Roberts and the others who participated in the 504 sit-in, quite frankly, gave to our generation a gift that I fear that we may work the rest of our lives without ever being able to repay. But I say it because, speaking beyond being the president of ASAN or a presidential appointee or anything else I've had the honor to be in the last 5 years, when I was a child in the special education system, and when I was looking for a source of hope, and when times were darkest for me, I discovered these words, and they made all the difference in giving me the strength to speak on my own behalf, but more importantly, work for the rights of others to do the same. Quote, "We have begun to ensure a future for ourselves and a future for the millions of young people with disabilities, who I think will find a new world as they begin to grow up, who may not have to suffer the kinds of discrimination that we have suffered in our own lives, but that if they do suffer it, they'll be strong and they'll fight back. And that's the greatest example, that we, who are considered the weakest, the most helpless people in our society, are the strongest and will not tolerate segregation, will not tolerate a society which sees us as less than whole people, but that we will together, with our friends, reshape the image that this society has of us. We are no longer asking for charity. We are demanding our rights."